Good morning and welcome to South Bay Sunday for Sunday, September 16th, 2012. I'm Sam Van Zandt. So you say what a lot these days? Did you attend a lot of rock concerts? Well, as somebody who has attended a lot of rock concerts and somebody who, through the miracle of radio, has had a lot of loud noise in his ear over the years, I'm here to tell you that hearing problems are very, very real for our generation. Anybody around the age of 50 these days, and many younger, are facing tinnitus and other forms of hearing issues, and a lot of it's based on the loud noise of all the concerts they've attended and basically just the loud noise in our lives. And Jeff Carroll, the clinical director of SoundCure, formerly associated with the University of California Irvine's Hearing Research Center, is here to talk to us about it. Jeff, welcome.
Thanks, Sam.
So, do you have a hearing problem yourself, or are you one of the fortunate ones who took care of his ears over the years?
I am one of the fortunate ones. I have what a lot of people experience from tinnitus, which is I get really stressed. I find myself, when I lay down to go to sleep, hearing a little something. Mm-hmm. But on a daily basis, typically I don't experience it.
Now, I've attended group meetings at the Hearing Institute in San Francisco and other institutes with people who have much more severe tinnitus than I do. And for those of you who don't know, that's ringing in your ears. And I've actually, sat in a room with people who say it's destroying their lives, that they can't sleep, they can't think. In my case, it's a steady ringing. And if I am, as you said, sitting alone and it's quiet, maybe before bed or on a quiet morning, it's there, and I'm aware of it, but I'm fortunate in that I'm sort of able to tune it out, and the ringing doesn't bother me, but that doesn't mean it doesn't affect my hearing. I certainly have great difficulty making out the sounds that people say sometimes, especially the spoken word, and yes, I've attended lots of rock concerts. How common is this?
It's actually really common, and sort of what you're describing is by far how most people experience it. When we look at the numbers in the U.S., roughly 50 million people are dealing with tinnitus in some fashion. That doesn't mean that there's 50 million people, running to see their doctors and having diminished quality of life. The vast majority of those would report very similar things to what you say. I'm aware of it at certain times. Sometimes it bothers me, but most of the time I'm fine. That's not really the population seeking treatment. There's really about 1 to 4 million Americans who have it in a significant fashion enough that it's bothersome to them on a daily basis. It affects their ability to sleep or concentrate, and really has a significant impact on their life.
And who are these people? I mean, I'm a disc jockey. I can say it happened to me because of the loud noises that I've been exposed to over the years, including once being in a parade when a string of firecrackers went off in my ear, and that didn't do me any good. But today we have many young people returning from combat, in Afghanistan and Iraq. No doubt they've been exposed to a lot of loud noises.
Absolutely. It's a very significant problem for returning soldiers. It's actually currently the number one service-connected disability. The VA, I believe the most recent numbers are paying out right around $1.1 billion in service-connected disability payments for tinnitus. So it's certainly a big problem for returning soldiers and veterans. It's also a problem for, as you said, anybody who's been exposed to noise. So we see, factory workers, musicians, and a lot of people who really would never think to themselves, gee, I've been exposed to a lot of noise. Noise is maybe one of the major issues that create this. However, something, less exotic like, age-related hearing loss, right? It, affects virtually everybody. A lot of people will just kind of develop a gradual onset of tinnitus over the years, and then maybe one day something really triggers it and makes them more aware of it. And then from that point on, it becomes a problem in their lives. So there aren't great predictors. We do know that it's highly correlated with hearing loss. When we look at people who have damage to the auditory system, it's probably about an 80% correlation with those who suffer from tinnitus.
One more young person connection, if you don't mind, and that is young people who walk around with these buds in their ears. I work out at my gym. I see a lot of 20-somethings who cannot seem to function without some music in their ears at all times. And sometimes I'm just tempted, especially with young people I know, to say, turn it down. Do yourself a favor, because someday you might pay the price for that noise.
Yeah, and that's great advice, too, because what we see, unfortunately, is the way that sound damages the auditory system. It comes from not just loudness, but amount of time, right? If we look at what Occupational Safety and Health Administration, OSHA, allows for, say, noise exposure in a factory, if you're at one level, you can be exposed to that for 8 hours. If you're at something above that, they might say, well, you can only be exposed to that for 15 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
One of the biggest issues that we see with MP3 players to date is part of it's the loudness. We know that MP3 players can get up to 105, 110 decibels, which, you can do damage literally within a few minutes at that level. Even people who feel like they're listening to it at a fairly comfortable level, maybe a little bit loud, one of the issues that we see is that you can listen to music continuously now for 18 hours straight, without taking a break, without having to change batteries or flip a cassette, right? There's no built-in need for a break from sound that we did see, in the fairly recent past.
Uh-huh. So does that mean the constancy of it has an effect too?
Absolutely. And so when we talk to people about ways to protect their hearing, it's really about turning the volume down, but also about limiting time. Just taking breaks every, once an hour for 10 minutes or so does wonders for limiting exposure. If it's something where there's a physical source like a concert, we also, the third parameter is distance, increasing your distance from the noise source rapidly decreases the loudness.
Good to know. I have to say, we're trying to do a service for folks who might have tinnitus, obviously, ringing in their ears or other hearing issues. And yet, for years I thought it was, well, I just took an aspirin and that created the ringing and I don't really have a problem at all. And then suddenly I realized I did have a problem. And then you go to seek out what kind of solutions you can come up with for something like tinnitus. And the solutions are fairly limited, aren't they?
Yeah, there are, a fairly limited number of good solutions. There's unfortunately a whole wide range of what we put in the category of snake oil or things that are less than reputable or not backed by science. Generally speaking, what we encourage everybody to do if they're bothered by the ringing, if it's and one point of clarification, when we say ringing, it can really be any type of sound, a whooshing or a buzzing or a chirping. Ringing is just very common, but if it's affecting your daily life, we encourage everybody to go see their audiologist. The audiologist can test their hearing, they can evaluate the tinnitus, they can determine if one of the treatment options is right for them, because there are some really good treatment options, despite the fact that a vast majority of medical professionals will tell you there's really not a lot that can be done. You just sort of have to live with it.
Right.
And kind of send you home and, maybe with a Xanax or something.
We're talking to Jeff Carroll, Ph.D. He's a clinical director for SoundCure. Now, there's a telling title. What is SoundCure?
SoundCure is a company that was started to bring to market some technology that was developed at the University of California, Irvine. Researchers there found some sounds that were very effective at interfering with the patient's tinnitus. So when we look at treatment options for tinnitus, one of the most common approaches is sound therapy. Sound therapy is where you use a sound from a device. It can be a ear one product with a little hearing aid, or it can be a handheld product. Our product's actually a handheld product used with earphones. And the sounds are intended to interfere with your tinnitus in a way that can be ignored. So you take your tinnitus, which is this ringing, piercing, really bothersome sound, and we're going to interfere with the vast majority of that sound using a different sound that hopefully is ignorable. That's sort of a short-term benefit. Long-term models for treatment of tinnitus, whether people getting better, stopping using treatment, have been around for decades. Sound therapy really benefits people through this process called habituation, where on day one they say that this tinnitus is loud, it's bothersome, and I can't sleep. And at some point later they get to where they say, well, in a quiet room I'm still aware that I know that it's there, but it doesn't bother me. It's not in the forefront like it used to be. So we always emphasize that it's not a cure, because the presence of tinnitus is still there. Just how it's perceived, the loudness, how often it's loud, is what we aim to significantly diminish over time.
Where can I learn more about this?
To learn more about our technology, SoundCure.com, so www.soundcure, all one word.com. We have some great resources there about sort of the history of the science and where the technology came from, what the product looks like now, and how to find a provider near you.
Mm-hmm.
We also like to send people to the American Tinnitus Association, a great nonprofit who have done a lot of very good research. They actually funded some of the original research at UC Irvine that developed this product. And so they're available at www.ata.org.
So since I suffer from tinnitus, Jeff, I have to say that I've been one of those people who was told years ago it's just something you have to live with. And I am living with it, and many, many other people are living with it. And it's got to be what you would consider, with the baby boomer generation and all the people with the buds in their ears, a very strong growth industry. How about the growth of progress for treatment? How fast is it moving, and what's been the most surprising thing you've learned in your research?
Well, the treatment progress, we look at a couple of different things. As I said, sound therapy has been around for a long time, and how it addresses populations can be somewhat limited. The historical approach to sound therapy is to use broadband noise or white noise, kind of sounds like a staticky radio. And for a percentage of patients, that's actually very effective. They can ignore it easily, like you can ignore the air conditioner running.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is, for a lot of people, those sounds either need to be significantly too loud, or they don't like the sound quality, and so it's just not a customized enough option for them. That was really the goal of technology from UC Irvine, was to find sounds that can be softer or more acceptable to the patient while still interfering with their tinnitus. So when we look at things like sound therapy, we do see new technology coming along, new breakthroughs in our understanding of how sounds are processed. When we're looking at things like, a true cure for tinnitus for those, the very small percentage of people who unfortunately do have truly very loud tinnitus that can't be treated with current approaches, they are very limited in what their options are, and we start getting into some very different types of treatment protocols, and currently none of the research is really suggesting great long-term curative benefits for that small percentage. We do see people all the time now who say, my life has been returned to me. I was able to really get something back with sound therapy. And again, that's been around for a long time. It's really just about making people aware that the technology exists, providing adequate training for providers in the field. Because again, with any new technology or any new approach, it usually takes a little bit of time to get into the market and to grow appropriately.
So it's not really a one-size-fits-all problem, is it?
No, absolutely not. The research from UCI, as well as lots of other approaches, have really shown that a customized approach, really just like any other type of medical intervention, you need to treat the patient first and not just say, well, here's a problem, here's a piece of technology to throw at it. With tinnitus, we see that the new technology that we're currently offering it's exciting, it's interesting, we like it, but just throwing technology at the problem, it isn't really necessarily all that effective. Right? We need trained providers who, with tinnitus, appropriate education about your condition, some counseling, some structured counseling approaches are typically much better received, and we see better long-term approach than just, hey, here's a piece of technology.
Yeah, we keep hearing about cochlear implants and other things, great technology, or also advances in perhaps, some sort of eardrum replacement and that kind of thing over the years. We keep hearing about them, but they're not really just around the corner, are they?
Well, cochlear implants are great technology. We have patients that, by we, I mean the community as a whole, has patients that were profoundly deaf, no ability to hear or communicate at all, receive a cochlear implant, and can now talk on the phone. That's certainly not everybody. The fact that that is occurring is miraculous. What's interesting when we look at sort of long-term, there are limitations to engineering technology, and what do we want to see? We start looking at things like gene therapy or, stem cell research and those types of things that really do offer the promise of curative approaches to damage to the auditory organ. Typically, sort of game-changing technologies like that, they tend to be 10 to 15 years off, sometimes 20 years off, and every time you hear about them, it's always 20 years.
Yeah.
20 years ago, we were 20 years away. Today, we're probably 20 years away.
Oh.
So it's one of those things where it's 20 years until all of a sudden it's there one day. And we have hope, and we have to keep funding, research that really looks at true curative approaches. But in the meantime, engineering approaches to auditory preservation and restoration have really come a long way, even in the last 5 years.
Well, as the problem grows, I'm sure the solutions will continue to multiply as well, especially since, the sad part is there's a market growing. The good part is because the market is growing, the attention is being paid. So if I want to learn more again, I can go to the ATA website. And what is the SoundCure website again?
SoundCure website is www.soundcure, SOUNDCURE, all one word, .com.
All right, that ringing in your ears isn't just your ex, It could be anything at all and might be tinnitus. So check out the website. And, Jeff, thanks for talking to us about it.
Thanks so much for having me on, Sam.